On Thursday, November 26th, we honored the life and achievements of Sojourner Truth. We're thankful for the youth farm crew and social justice educators at Kingston YMCA Farm Project for imagining the commemoration of November 26th as Sojourner Truth Day and leading the call for formal recognition of the date by the Ulster County Legislature, the City of Kingston, and the Town of Esopus. This afternoon, as part of the African Roots Center Real History series, we welcome Rev Dele, who will present a program entitled Daughter of a Tree, a spiritual walk through the woods with Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth was raised in Ulster County on the Hudson River. In the 1850 publication, The Narrative of Sojourner Truth, she told Olive Gilbert that she led a wild, out-of-doors life. Using poetic prose, Rev Dele opens our spiritual imagination to that life in nature and speaks to ways Sojourner's spiritual journey may continue to liberate our thoughts and life on this land. Rev Dele, a visionary pastor, author, and grandmother, will read excerpts from her upcoming children's book on Sojourner Truth and answer questions about her research and discoveries. This program is funded in part by Humanities New York with support from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities. I am pleased to introduce Rev Dele.
I flow from the mountains to the valleys. I flow in the river through the plains. I flow from the creeks to the ocean, and through the air I come back again. I'm here with my family. I'm going to invite them to sing with me again. We're all socially distanced, but I needed some live people. I flow from the mountains to the valleys. I flow in the river through the plains. I flow from the creeks to the ocean and through the air. Through the air, I come back again. Thank you for your participation. I appreciate that. You heard my mother's voice, my mother who does not even speak, but she can sing with me. I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for this land that we stand on. We are in the Muncie Lenape region of upstate New York. And I have with me a friend, an indigenous elder from the Mohican tribe, who she says, well, you know, we just lived all together. We didn't have boundaries. So I wanted to give her an opportunity to give greetings as well.
Thank you, Rev Dele. I'm delighted to be here. With you, and I wish all who are participating in this afternoon the peace and love of the Creator. And now I'm going to be more
socially distance. They go back right to her seat. Oh, this is fun. Okay, so I wanted to tell you that the song "I Flow" is a water song, and it was given to me when I was asking Spirit, okay, now how do I help these scientists at Harvard understand water spiritually? And that's kind of what I gave. So I understand that it's not only about the water cycle, but it's also about the cycle of spirit. And it teaches us a lesson in resilience, you know, that water flows regardless of the mountains, regardless of the environment that it's in. It never forgets its purpose, and it doesn't get distracted. It just reshapes and reforms, but it still is what it was created to be. And I think that's something that we can take for ourselves. I wanted to also share with you the other earth items that are joining us today. This is a very special gift. Dear Antlers, I was in the woods on Easter morning last year, and I sat down for my meditation, and poof, these appeared. A spirit, a symbol of regeneration. So I'm thankful for that. The light that you see in the candle that's burning in the back, it's a candle, it's a pine cone. And you may know that the pineal gland is named for the pine cone because they look the same. And the pineal gland is the only part of the brain that is neither left hemisphere nor right hemisphere. It's just in the center. Its job is to perceive light. And we're told that when the body, when the eyes become single, that the body becomes filled with light. And so this is my reminder that all of us have that eternal light inside of us, and it can shine clearly and brightly with joy. So that's had to introduce all of my relations that are with us today. Today, the presentation is going to be kind of a sandwich. I want to tell you a little bit about how did I get here? Why am I doing this? And then I'm going to share two stories from my manuscript. I thought that at this point that I would have, the illustrations, I would have, to show you. But COVID took my illustrator onto other duties, like teaching children at home and that sort of thing. So we'll talk a little bit about the book project after I share from the manuscript itself. And of course, I put some questions, question in the chat. So if you feel inspired to think about how much about slavery should we discuss in a children's book, I'll just leave that to you. Okay. So the other thing is I'm going to do a little bit of reading, but I really want to, I just want to have fun and I want to tell story. So I'm not really going to stick to the script. So I hope you won't be too disappointed. Okay. I just want to tell the story. So how did we get here, first of all? Well, actually, my whole presentation of Mother Nature, why is this Mother Nature thing so important to you right now? Well, because back in 2012, I was minding my own business. Don't you know that minding your own business can really get you into big, big trouble? I was minding my own business on some family land in Virginia. It was a beautiful day. I was deep in the pine forest. It was a blue sky and there were a few clouds here and there. And I'm in a quiet town. It's a town of 1,800 people, right? You hardly ever hear anything, except maybe the football game, during football. Well, this was not football season, okay? It's in the middle of the day. I'm raking and putting, and all of a sudden this voice comes across, "This is not your work." What do you mean this is not my work? I kind of knew what Spirit was saying, but I was not really trying to hear that. Here I was on this land in the middle of nowhere. My family's not happy with me. They are really fighting. They don't like the fact that I'm here. The people in the neighborhood don't like that I'm here. I'm the first Black to live on this side of the tracks. They don't like this natural stuff that I'm doing in the yard. I was just catching it here and there. And then Spirit said, "This is not your work." Really? Well, honey, I snapped my head around, and no sooner had I done that than this swarm of ticks came. Yes, ticks. I'm not playing. I have not known ticks. They did. They really did. They swarmed that day and drove me out of the forest. So I quit arguing with Spirit. Yeah, Mom, I quit arguing. And I went inside, I cleaned up, but I was still not happy. And so I went and I cleaned up. I went into my office. All right, what do you want me to do? Just tell me, what do you want? Okay, I'm a 6th generation activist minister. I know you cannot run from God. It's not smart. It gets you in all kinds of trouble. So I want to get it right. What do you want? And so another audible voice says, "Teach the church how to model sustainability." Teach the church? They're not asking to learn anything. Those hard-headed people The church? But I quit arguing, okay? I loaded up my truck, put my dog in there, my clothes, and I hit the road. And I'm trying to say, how do you teach people who don't want to learn? I mean, how do you do this? So I had pilot projects all up and down the East Coast. I went to Johannesburg to learn climate reality with Mr. Gore, and I found out that people there, just like the communities of color here, they're really more concerned with earth-based solutions. They said, we need to eat now. We need our water clean now. And there's ways to make that happen. So after 7 years of bouncing around as an itinerant environmental missionary, environmental mission, that's right. I have family. I have family here because I need a live audience. I came up with a program called Soil and Souls. You can see it on my website, and it's featuring 18 to 35-year-old resilience leaders. Now that's all well and good, but I keep discovering as I keep doing this work that people who are doing environmental work don't have their own relationship with nature. They're talking about nature, but they're not relating to nature. And I find that people in doing all these campaigns, they're in despair, they're depressed. And I'm like, how can you be depressed if your hands are in the soil? The chemicals in the soil are specifically designed to calm you, to balance you, to give you joy. Yes, that's right. Those chemicals, the serotonin, all of those onin, they're in the soil. See, he's making faces at me, but that's okay. So people, and I'm finding that we're very caught up with the problem and we're not thinking about the solution. Even with COVID, don't you know that in 30 days we had clean air when people paid attention? It doesn't take that long. And so what I'm hoping is that by writing this book about Sojourner Truth, about her experience in nature, about her faith, that the next generation of children will have a different relationship with nature. They won't have to be healed. Now, even before they go and grow their food, we've got to heal all of that trauma of enslavement and oppression and just all of the nasty things that have happened to people who take care of the land. We've got to fix that. And so that's what I'm hoping that this book will help us to do. Also, I wanted you to know that this is not something new. I didn't make this up. I'm not the first one to have said this. Bell Hooks reminds us that when we were in nature, when we, during enslavement, that we were working with the soil every day, and we knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that this master, this human master, had the master of nature over him. That in a moment's notice, everything that the master planned could be undone because the spirit was working. But when we moved into the cities, we no longer had that visceral experience that God is really in control. And so we became disillusioned, we became disconnected, and we didn't have the mental and emotional stamina to fight all of the fights that need to be fought. A lot of our Christian mystics didn't live in monasteries. Okay, and a lot of the mystics in our history, they're not listed as mystics. They're listed as business innovators, or they're listed as politicians. They have other kinds of titles. But I just wanted, Sojourner Truth is one of those examples. There's a couple of examples. She tells in her adult life that when she was running after a streetcar, and the streetcar would not let her on because she's a Black woman, and so he takes off. She picks up and runs, beats the streetcar to the next stop. Hi! Takes off again. She takes off again. She runs. She beats him to the next stop. Hi! Well, she did this a few times, and he kind of got the message that this wasn't going to stop. And he led her on. It really, yes, that really happened. And it reminds me of the stories that the yogis tell of how they were in different places at the same time. And you have that in all of your indigenous stories of people doing phenomenal things when spirit has called them to rise and to lift the oppression in that particular time of day. George Washington Carver was another one. My grandmother was in school with him while he was a teacher at Tuskegee Institute. And she said, he was a little odd. She did, she said that. But he told Congress that when he went into the lab, he didn't have any books. Only book he had was the Bible. And he went in, opened his Bible, stated his case, and he said the hand came through and put on the table whatever he needed for the day. Now, if that's not a mystical experience, I don't know what it is. So that's part of the history that we need to reclaim, the spiritual undergirding that all of us have access to and that all of us need when we are fighting for liberation. So how did I get to truth? Well, as I get older, truth is something nearer and dearer to me. And I really have to thank my mother for the ability not only to tell the truth, but to hear the truth and make peace with it. Now, what I really love about that is that, I mean, we are a truth-telling family. And we have learned to tell the truth in love, but we're truth tellers. And I like that because I don't really like what I've come to call a snowflake peace. Okay, you know how when the snow is out and everything is all one color, all right? And it's very quiet, but underneath there's all these kind of things happening. You know, so underneath all of that peace and quiet, that's not really what's going on. Our ancestors said it this way. This is, the teeth are smiling, but is the heart smiling? Okay, we know about that. So I want a truth that is vibrant and diverse. And I want a truth that's not going to melt when the sun comes out. I want truth that can stand in the light of day. And so I have to thank my mother for that, for the not only the courage, but the strength to be able to hear the truth and not become bitter, and to really look for the ways out of situations, because there is a way. Now, the other thing is, I found myself, what was it, last year, living 5 miles south of where Sojourner Truth was born and raised. And I was like, oh my gosh. We went to Port Ewan, where there's a statue of her as a child. And that's close to where she lived, in a tavern. And while she was working at that tavern, she gathered mugwort and yarrow and things to flavor the beer. Yeah, she did. Sojourner Truth was an herbalist at 11 years old. Who knew, right? Who knew she would take that herbal knowledge and use it later on in nursing, you know, when there was wars and things, people needed attention. So I told my sister in ministry, Dr. Laverne Hall, I said, oh my gosh, because I know she did her dissertation on Sojourner Truth, on her conversion experience as an adult. And she knew about my love of nature. And she says, check out Sojourner's history. Her father was called the tree. I said, what? Yeah, he was called a tree because he was tall and stood up straight. And in Dutch, because they only spoke Dutch, they said he was called Boomfree. And so, okay, well, Sojourner Truth, daughter of a tree. And so I started thinking, and she says, why don't you write a book? I said, I'm not feeling no book. And she says, write a children's book. Oh, and so then the rhyme started coming to me, and I started getting happy about that. But guess what? Spirit told me again, excuse me, this is not your story. Well, what do you mean? I'm out here in nature and I'm running around with the herbs like she was doing. And they said, read it again. and I read it again. And not only was she running around in nature, she made herself a brush harbor. Other children are, to pray in at 11 years old. And she said that she went there at least once a day as a child. And so then I got really into, oh boy, she made this thing and wove everything, the willow leaves, and they said, read it again. So I read it again, and guess what? Her first testimony of deliverance, of where she used prayer to save herself, happened before she made all of those external things. It happened, and I'm going to share a little bit from the book, but it happened just because in her heart of hearts, she poured her heart out to God, to the universe. And she said, I need you. I need you to show up. Her mother taught her to pray when she was 9 years old. She learned the Lord's Prayer. And she would say that when she would go to pray, she just go talk to God. Like, where are you? I need you. And she would say, everything she prayed for, she got. But then she says, I should have prayed before I got in trouble. It never occurred to me to pray before I got in trouble. She was honest. She told the truth. But what she did pray for, she received. And that happened at a very early age. And so I want to encourage other young people to know that God is real and that you can have that personal relationship and to have clarity about what are you supposed to do and to get wisdom for how to get out of the trouble that you usually get into when you're little, because that's what being little is for, right? To get into trouble. Right? So, so here we are with the book. And I guess that's all I want to say for right now. But I want to go to the book, but I'm not going to go to you as this nicely dressed adult lady. Slaves didn't get to wear this stuff, right? They took all of our beads, all of our jewelry away. So I'm going to let it go. They didn't let us wrap our head, take all that mess off. Sometimes we got to keep our braids. And so here I am. I want to read to you the introduction. All right, okay, I'm not 9 years old, okay? So I am going to have to do this. This is the introduction to the book. And this hopefully is what the children will read. Sojourner Truth wasn't always a strong speaker for human rights. She was once a child who wanted to spend time with her family and play with friends, just like you. When she was born, she was named Isabella, and she was called Belle for short. Her father, James, was nicknamed Boomfried, which means tree in Dutch, because as a young man, he stood tall and very straight. Her mother was named Elizabeth and was called affectionately Ma-Bet. Ma-Bet taught Belle to pray at a very early age, and her father was a strong, reassuring presence in her life. During the time that she was a slave for Martinus Shriver, Belle spent a lot of time in nature and began her lifelong practice of praying outside. As described in her biography, Belle led a wild, out-of-doors life. It was a life that suited me for that time. She had time to watch the white-sailed sloops on the Hudson River. They traveled at great speeds, moving freight and people about. Some had been warships, and they were known for practicing special maneuvers in shallow waters. Browsing around the riverbanks, Belle found a special place on an island where she built a prayer space out of willows so she could talk to God and not be heard by the people passing by on the road above her. The sheep would be grazing in the middle space. We know that adult Africans built hush harbors as outdoor worship spaces for groups of people. These worship spaces in nature help people develop their faith so they could stand up for their rights. The same thing is true today. In nature, we breathe freely God's breath of life. Our hearts are strengthened by nature's awesome beauty. And as our love for God comes together with our love for God's creation, it's easier to learn our own presence and our own purpose in life. Bill was burned with hot irons because she couldn't speak English. She only spoke Dutch. Now her master, Mr. Naley, he knew Dutch, but he burned her with irons and she was crying. When they would ask her to go get a pot and she'd bring a spoon, she didn't know. I was doing the best I can. She went and bought bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Bread of heaven, rock Danny till I die. Rock Danny till I die. Deliver me. During that time, the slaves still did their traditional dances. They did their ring shouts. And they sang until the power of the Lord came down and possessed them and gave them the strength that they needed. Belle had heard, seen some of this, and that's what she did. And she prayed, God, send my daddy to save me. Daddy, rock Daddy, rock Daddy, rock Daddy, rock Daddy, rock Daddy. God, you saved him. You gotta save me. My mama said to pray to you. She said to pray to you and save me. And guess what? Daddy came. Now, by that time, he was old. He had been set free because he was too old to work. And he came slowly. And he came to visit Belle. And she had to wait until the master had gone somewhere else so she could talk to her dad in private. She said, Daddy, please find me another place. Because she knew that during that time that the enslaved people who had found favor with the Europeans, they could often make deals and they could help people get into better situations. So that's what she asked her father to do. And he was slowly going through. He says, well, I'll do what I can. That's all he would say. And he walked back out to the gate. And every day after he left, Belle would jump in his footsteps because it was in snow time. And she would jump in each one of his steps going out because she was going out that gate. She kept praying and got ready to go. And guess what? Not too long after that, this man on a horse came. And he came right up to her. And he asked her, he said, would you like to come live with me? And she wasn't used to white people just asking her what did she want. And she was she nodded her head, too scared to speak right then. And he went on and gave Mr. Neely, that was the cruel man, gave him some money. And he said, come on, let's go home. You're gonna hoe corn, you're gonna haul fish, and I need you to go in the woods and get herbs for my beer. Because he was a fisherman as well as a tavern keeper. And that was Martin Schreiber. And so she went and she thought to herself, this is a strange man talking to me like that. She didn't know that he had never owned slaves before. And so maybe he didn't know you weren't supposed to talk to them like human beings. But it was a nice place for her to live. And that's where she led that wild, out of doors life. Just free. Free to be who God meant her to be. And as she was sitting, she was remembering how she used to sit on her father's knee. And she felt how special she could be inside. And as long as she was sitting on her father's knee, she thought to herself, well, they call my father the tree. So if it matters to the tree, it matters to me. I'm gonna be who I was meant to be. And she kept up that thought. Dear river, I long to cross Jordan. Deep river. That's what she used to sing on the skilly pot. Skilly pot is Dutch for tortoise. And that's what they called the ferry tortoise, because it was so slow. People didn't like it being that slow. But Belle didn't care. It could take all day. As long as she was on that ferry and on the way, she could listen to the wind. She could see the birds fly. She could imagine herself in all these different spaces. She could look and see the fish in the river, and she could look at the fish in the basket that she sat on the ferry. They sent her on the ferry to go to Roundout, to catch, to pick up molasses and to pick up supplies that they needed at the tavern. They just let her go. And one day, when she got off the ferry, it was a really pretty day, and she didn't think anybody would mind. So she put her fish down by the riverbank, and she climbed up. You know, the riverbank is very tall, and the trees go straight from the bottom all the way up. And that's what she loved to see. And as she was climbing up, she was trying to get to this one particular tree. And as she reached for it, oh, she fell down and started rolling and rolling and rolling. And you know what? Her friends, the mugwort, came. Here they are. And they wrapped themselves around her. And they wrapped 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 her up into a big, so she was just this big ball going down the hill until she was just like a bale of hay. Rock Daniel, rock Daniel, rock Daniel. And she was just going, going, going until the herbs landed her safely at the shore. And while she was there, she stuck her foot in the mud and she reached one high up. And she opened her arms wide to the sun and she gave thanks to God. And the sun came out and it touched her heart and healed her soul. She said, thank you, God, for making me whole. And that is all. I'm going to read a couple of the passages from the stories I just told. I told you I just wanted to have fun. One of the things that I noticed that was interesting, and you'll see that in the book when it comes out, is that there are a lot of different trees here when Sojourner was here. And I noticed that there were a lot of spruce. And there's 3 different kinds of spruce. There's black spruce that grows in the water. There's the red spruce that grows in the meadows, and that's what they make flutes out of. And there's the white spruce, and it grows at the tree line at the edge. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Black, red, and white, all living together in a harmonious space. I thought that was kind of maybe a lesson for some of us. but you'll have to get the book to read it. So, my Ma Bet taught me how to pray. Just open your heart and let spirit have its way. We spoke Dutch in our home, it was all I knew. That's what I spoke, and my faith in God grew. My father James was tall, they called him the tree. I felt so special sitting on his knee. As we sat and we talked, I came to believe that if it mattered to the tree, it matters to me. I will be who I was meant to be. I felt best if I could pray real loud outside, just me and God, the sun and the trees. I prayed for all the good things that were meant to be. But then they came to take me away from all bet and bomb free. I only spoke Dutch and couldn't understand English. So the new master was very mean to me. I prayed for God to help me to leave. I prayed outside, send my father to me. By that time he was free and he could walk with me, please. It wasn't too long before Daddy came. He walked a little slowly with snow in his way. I'll do what I can, is all he would say. Every day after that, I jumped in his footprints in the snow. I prayed my prayers and I got ready to go. Short time after Daddy left, Master Shriver came to that same gate. He was a friend of our first master. They both fought in the war, but he never owned any slaves. I think that made him different. And he came right up to me at Mr. Neely's. And then, the little bit about the time on the ferry. His house was at the top of a hill and the river was at the bottom where the boats came in for the ice house landing. Like my daddy, the trees were tall and straight. They grew all the way from the bottom of the river to the top of the road. Sometimes we would use a donkey because the ice was a heavy load. I rode to the town of Roundout to buy molasses and things. Because the ferry was slow, we named her Skillypot. That's the Dutch word for tortoise. I would sit on my fish basket and listen to the wind. The wind blows the water and clears my mind. All heavy thoughts are left far behind. So, you have received some teasers from my manuscript, and I wanted to show you just a sample. My illustrator is someone from my Micmac lineage, and this is some of her work that she's done before. This shows people coming to Earth. She says, well, you know, this isn't the first time we've destroyed our mother. But anyway, I love the mystical, the colors and the mysticism of that. So, like I said, I thought that we would have pictures at this point. So I want to tell you a little bit about the book project. I'm inviting co-publishers to help me publish the book, to pay for the illustration, for the formatting, a little bit of marketing. And I've set a goal of $2,500. I've self-published before, and that's about what it costs to get everything done. So I want to invite you to be a co-publisher with me. And guess what? We already have some co-publishers. It will not be me by myself or you by yourself. Dr. Laverne Hall, she has stepped up to the plate. Woo! And everyone who is a co-publisher will, of course, have their name written in the book. You will receive a personalized signed copy of the book. And for contributions over $100, there will be an affiliates agreement, and we'll talk about that. Affiliates agreement means that we'll do some promotion on your work so that one hand is washing the other, and we really start practicing this cooperative economics that we keep talking about. So that's all I have to share. Let's see if I have anything else on my notes. I think that just a reminder that many of us pray that prayer that we ask God to give us this day our daily bread. And we need to remember that the bread and the grain come from the land. And that when we go back to God's original design, the land will regenerate itself. And so shall it be. All right, so now I really will stop talking. And I will turn it back over to Troy Ellen and let her navigate all 38 comments down here.
And thank you so much for that storytelling. It was just incredible.
I had fun. I hope you all liked it.
I think we all did. But I'm going to start reading some of the comments. Oh, and Rev Dele, you will get a transcript of all of the comments that have been placed here.
Oh, okay, great.
So in answer to your first question, where you asked for people's thoughts about discussing slavery in children's books, we have a variety of responses. Susan says, I think enough to inform and educate, but not enough to traumatize. In other words, a balance should be pursued as it is art, but also history. V. Gail Miller comments, it depends on the target age of the book.
Ah. I'm looking at around the 11-year-old range, the same age that Sojourner was when she lived this particular life.
Thank you. Another person, McCadden, has commented, we're also thinking different kinds of information for different age ranges to introduce even at preschool level, 3 to 6-year-olds, 7 to 9-year-olds, 10 to 12, 13 to 15, 16 and older. But I believe that since you've, please remember to keep your, your videos turned off to minimize the distraction. Thank you. Camilla writes, enslavement is trauma. Our children need to know about the trauma and how it helps us heal and survive.
Okay.
Rebecca writes, Jewish children hear stories of slavery each Passover.
Okay, it's part of the cultural transmission.
Another comment, when I was 9, I learned all aspects of slavery, particularly since my great-grandfather was the son of the slave owner.
Whoa.
Camilla, I'm sorry, that previous comment was V. Gail Miller. Camilla writes again, reading the book White Too Long, The Legacy of White Supremacy in American Christianity. My maternal family is from the Hurley Stone Ridge area in Ulster County. We have deeds and documents of our family living in Hurley in the 1700s.
Wow.
Also provided, McCadden has also provided a lot of information and links to various documents. And as I said, you will get a copy of this, so you'll be able to follow this, Rev Dele.
Okay.
Camilla comments, truth that is vibrant is the truth in the smile and in the heart. And someone says, yay, mugwort.
Keep it simple. You know, it's called mugwort because it was commonly used in the mugs, you know, in the ale, you know, the nourishing ales. It's also called motherwort because it was used to calm the womb after childbirth. So it was used for mothers. So.
Comment from Veronica. Storytelling is so vital to our culture. That's very true. Many comments saying beautiful, beautiful share. I'm working my way through. Everybody seems to think it's beautiful, and I agree with them completely.
Well, wonderful. If you feel moved to help publish this, to help move this project to the next stage, you can go to revdele.com, and there's a tab that says Become a Co-Publisher. You can also just email me, and we can just talk. You can even call me. You know, I even take phone calls, and we can just talk about, you know, how we can work together to bring this project to full fruition.
It's revdele.com, and your email is revdele at revdele.
No, it's Rev at Rev Dele.
Oh, rev at revdele.com. Thank you. Because one of our guests, Jez, asked, yay, how do we become a co-publisher? So they got the answer. Love the poetry and storytelling. Beautiful storytelling. Thank you. Illustrations are beautiful. It's a lot of messages.
I love it. I haven't done this in so long, and I had so much to say. It was hard to squeeze it into a small presentation, but thank you, all of you, for being there, for being with me in this time and sharing this space. I think the storytelling bug has bit me again. Some of you know I used to do that professionally with my drumming. I may go back to it. Well done, sis. Oh, my family. Okay, so I have someone who's priming me for hecklers over here, and the congratulatory ones over there. So that's my balance, okay?
There's a whole wealth of information and comments in here. I think you'll enjoy reading it through.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Madasita, Waleliok, Asante Sana. I think that's the only languages I know.
I particularly like when you said white, black, and red, the trees.
Trees, how about that? They all found a space to nourish themselves and nourish their surroundings.
If anybody else has any other questions or comments, you can place them in the chat.
Thank you all so much. I was hoping this would be kind of like family time after Thanksgiving. You know, you're just sitting around chilling. You see my table is set. You're welcome to come over for dinner.
I'd like to invite people now to please stay muted, but you can turn on your video.
Oh boy, let me put this in gallery view. See all Brady Bunch. Hi. I'm not going to call everybody's name because I just, but hi. Oh my goodness, people I haven't seen in a long time. Thank you.
Here's what I want to know. How did the Brady Bunch use Zoom back in the 70s?
I don't know, but remember they used to have those 6 squares and do. Are there any other questions of me or the, I'm trying to think if there's anything else of interest. Let me get my cheat sheets out. One thing that Sojourner said about her, again, another thing she said about her time with the Shrivers is that they were kind and crude. She says that's where she learned how to curse. But, you know, she was a child and that was probably a lot of fun. I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, those are all the tidbits, unless people have questions. I've missed your drumming and storytelling for years. Please do it again. I will do it again. In fact, I'm getting the bug here. I'm really going to turn this into like a show. Yes, please, storytelling and drumming. Well, you guys are going to have to join me. You know, I used to be part of a women's drum circle. Yeah, you didn't know that, Mom, huh? Yep. And we had some annual events that we would perform at. And our teacher was a young person. It was so funny that he would balance between trying to keep all these elderly women in line, because we're just, you know, laughing and talking while we're supposed to be drumming. And he would balance, you know, strictness, because he called, again, in the African tradition, he called us all mamas. He says, okay, mamas, come on now. And so he would have to balance being the teacher and being the child, because in that situation, he was both. And it was beautiful the way he managed that kind of relationship. It's beautiful. We're in Hudson Valley, did the Shrivers. So there is a historical marker. If you go up 9W, when you get into Port Ewan, if you're going from the south to the north, the marker is on the right-hand side, and it talks about, that's the tavern where Sojourner Truth lived. It's a house, it's a stone house, and it looks like people still live in it. You know, stone houses last forever. So that's where the tavern was. And you'll see that the road down to the river is very steep, and the trees are still there, very tall, from the bottom of the river all the way up to past the road. But it's in Port Ewan. That's okay. Oh, good. The writing point, okay, is going to engage youth. Yes, that's what we hope it does. Sojourner Truth also lived in other spaces. Let me get I have to get my notes out now. She lived before she became Sojourner Truth. You know, do you know she was actually in her 60s before she began her speaking, you know, that really strong speaking tour. And I want to say it was all that singing she did in nature and across the river that gave her this powerful singing voice that we're told about. But she was born, let me see, I got to get my notes. She was born, I think, in Esopus, and then she was sold. Where is it? Oh, okay. She was born in Riften, Esopus, on the Hardenberg's property. And then she was sold when the Charles Hardenberg died. You know how you dispose of your estate. So that's when she and a younger sibling were sold away. She was sold to this Mr. Neely, and it was so funny. They talk about her being on the auction block, just bored out of her tears, trying to look as dumb as she could. You know, like, no, she didn't want it, and no one wanted to buy her, right? And so finally, she says, "Okay, I'll throw in a flock of sheep." So with the Sojourner, with the flock of sheep, was sold for $100. And Mr. Neely was just crazy mean. You know, I told you, he burnt. In fact, he asked her to come to the barn one Sunday morning, and when he tied up her hands and then burned her because she wasn't speaking English. But after that, that was at Roundout Creek, and then she went from Roundout Creek to the Shrivers in Port Ewan. And then from Port Ewan, she was sold to Mr. Dumont. Mr. Dumont was a frequenter of the tavern, and he must have seen what a hard worker she was. She was very tall and very strong. And so the Dumonts lived in New Paltz. And that's why you have SUNY New Paltz. You have a lot of acknowledgement of Sojourner Truth in this area. So she lived with the Dumonts about 16 years. And then there was a law that said that the enslaved Africans in New York would be freed early. And so when it came time for her to be free, Mr. Dumont came up with some reason why she couldn't be freed. And she said, later for that. So he said, well, you know, you hurt yourself and you didn't give me what I wanted. And so she spun 100 pounds of yarn. And she said, okay, here, take your stuff. And she took her baby, because she had children. I won't go into all of that, but she had children, her youngest child, and walked off. She says, it didn't seem right that I should run away. She just walked off. And so she walked off to her Quaker friend's house, and she knew Mr. Dumont was going to come after. She didn't care. And he did. And when he got there was some conversation between him and the Quaker family, and they gave him $20, which is, he paid $300 for Sojourner, okay? Gave him $20, and he took the money and went on back home. The historians say that it was a complicated relationship. There was some kind of respect, but again, this is slavery, so, you know, but that's, and then after that is when she began an adult reflection of her life and chose the name Sojourner, was given to her actually by Spirit. And then she says, she went back to God and said, well, I need a last name. And he said, well, just tell the truth. And so that was truth. Yeah, see, you guys are the numbers. By law, 1827, but it took a while. So but she was holding them. She had found out, and she was holding him to that, and she walked off. She said she walked her way to freedom. Oh yeah, we have all of that. Yeah, so other people are filling in her the adult part. She did, you know, other amazing things besides talk about Ain't I a Woman. Okay.
Which actually the original version that was of her speech, transcription of her speech, did not use Ain't I a Woman. It was actually much clearer, but many years later, I think about 15 years later, someone else gave and decided that she needed to sound like she came from the South, which was so bizarre since, you know, she spoke High Dutch and came from New York.
Well, that was artistic license.
I think you're being kind.
I know, I'm not telling the truth right now. Yeah, it was, and she was very particular about her presence. She wore Quaker clothing because she did not want to be perceived as being poor. She didn't want people to feel sorry for her. She practiced her diction. So, you know, this whole idea of slavery in the North, people, again, they couldn't tell the truth. And so they had to make it something else. Can anyone share a link where we can find the original transcription? Original transcription of, do you have that, Troy Ellen?
Not handy, but if you drop, whoever asked the question, if you drop it, your email address into the chat, I'll get it to you.
Also, a lot of, of course, I read her biography that she narrated to Olive Woods, but also I got a lot of details just from the New Paltz Journal, because the local people here, because that's kind of the area where I am right now, local people here really have been digging into history and lifting up different things that Sojourner said when she was still Isabella. And that's really where I got the most of her children's information. One thing I did not tell you about why she wanted to pray outside in outdoors. Again, this was a very impressionable story that she got as a child. She had heard about a soldier who had been left for dead in the battlefield. And it was said that he just cried out to God, he cried out to God, he cried out to God, and finally he was rescued. And so she got from that story, she got the idea that God hears you better when you're outside. And she says that in her work.
One of the comments is, I have a belief that being enslaved in the Deep South was more dehumanizing than in the North. Is there any research that bears that out? Which, no. It was just as dehumanizing up here, perhaps even more so. I'm dropping in the chat information about a documentary where slavery died hard, The Forgotten History of Ulster County and the Shawangunk Mountain region, because they fought tooth and nail not to have slavery end in this part of the world. But it was just as dehumanizing no matter where it existed. But let's end on a high note.
I flow from the mountains to the valleys. I flow in the river through the plains. I flow from the creeks to the ocean, and through the air I come back again.